this girl who looked as though she was about 6'2", in this tiny white bikini and white space boots, comes walking up, and she had like a volunteer thing around her neck, and she said, "I'm sorry, please don't throw that here." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to any harm." And she said, "This is the temple."
Welcome to the Crossing It Off podcast, where each episode we share the stories of individuals that are living out their bucket/life goal lists. I am your host, Roger Williams, and through hearing our guests' adventures, my goal is that you will find encouragement and empowerment to add and cross items off of your list. Thank you, everyone, for coming to another episode of the Crossing Off podcast. I am so excited about this episode. This is something that I've had on my bucket list for a while, and I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it there. So I'm expecting my guest to kind of help me work through that. So my guest today is David Skipp, and he describes himself as a father, an adventurer, a waterman, and a world traveler. David, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Roger. I've been looking forward to this. It'll be fun.
I agree. So tell us, what did you cross off your bucket list?
I crossed off attending Burning Man, which I guess I'll tell you about as we proceed.
Yeah, so Burning Man is a thing that happens out in the desert in Nevada, I believe. People have lots of misconceptions maybe about what it is. So what is Burning Man?
Well, as you implied, Burning Man is one of the most misunderstood events in the world, and it's truly something that is very difficult to describe unless you go and experience it. And once you do, there is sort of a common effect that informs participants, and everybody sort of gets it after 9 days in the desert. Many people, when they ask you about the experience, they think it's a big music festival.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, music's huge and really weaves everything together. But it's not a music festival. There are no music acts. No formal big-time music acts. Also, everyone thinks that it's this fabulous love orgy, which it certainly has some of those elements, but it's quite a unique thing. It's really an ongoing experiment. I think every year is an experiment of bringing a huge number of people. We're now around 70,000 from all over the world, extremely diverse group of people, all celebrating what's possible interacting with other human beings. And it involves, as everyone knows, large-scale monumental art, small art, exploring any way you want of communicating with each other, celebrating the human body in all of its forms, and completely forgetting for about 9 days this barrage that affects all of us of consumerism and materialism. And you really don't quite get it until you go there, the effect of not being surrounded by branding and logos and the come on. So that's tremendous. And then you immediately have to learn to drop this ingrained tendency of all of us to prejudge people. You see somebody and go, "Oh," or you hear somebody's voice and you somehow subconsciously or automatically prejudge. And then having a huge amount of fun in a psychedelic setting over a whole bunch of days. So it's pretty much the best damn thing in the world for 9 days. And like a vacation, your happiest day is when you drive onto the Playa, and the second happiest is when you leave.
Wow. So tell us, this is about your story of getting there. When and why did you put this thing on your bucket list?
Well, about 20 years ago, I read some article about Burning Man. I immediately thought of my daughter. She was about 13 at the time, and since she was born, has been a very, very self-aware
Hmm.
person and supremely creative, constantly, just spontaneously creating and expressing in very interesting ways. And so I thought about her and I told her about it. And I said, you and I are going to go do this thing. She and I have a long history of canoeing and camping together. I remember driving through rural Florida, and she was just a kid, and she's like, of course, rapidly thumbing on her phone, and she goes, "Well, Dad, this is going to be the first ever camping trip tweeted on Twitter." And Twitter had just come out.
Right.
And so she's always been this adventurer and a partner in crime with me. And so I thought about this. I told her about it. And then because it happens sort of like the summer solstice, it always takes place right about the time that school starts,
Uh-huh.
last week of August, first
First
week
week
of
of September.
September.
Mhm.
And so for many, many years, it was just a great idea that we always joked about. And it wasn't until she was in graduate school at the California Institute of the Arts, CalArts, that we managed to pull it off.
And so, what drew you to this event? I mean, there's events all over the world, all different kinds of things. Share with the audience. I mean, most people think this is like a young person's thing. So talk about that a little bit. Like, what drew you at your age at that time to say, "I want to do this"?
That's a great question, and I don't really have an answer. I think what really drew me to it and my daughter was this idea of there are 10 principles
Mm-hmm.
that were developed around Burning Man over the decades, and they're the 10 principles. They're great things to live a good secular life by, and one of them is radical inclusion. Another is radical self-sufficiency.
Mm.
And I think we love the idea of, we always loved getting ready for camping, and the idea of putting together the essentials that you need to survive in a completely hostile environment, and then to go and meet other wildly creative people.
Mm-hmm.
And concerning age, that's right. It really looks like a young person's event, and I think that probably it would be ideal to start going to Burns around the age of 25. But I've always felt as though I'm about 28 since since I was 28, and it just looked like something that would be an absolute blast. And one of I think my daughter Eli and I, we've always bonded over Monty Python. One of their sayings is, "And now for something completely
Completely
different."
different.
And
Yeah.
so that was it. Oh,
Yes.
and lastly, and perhaps most importantly, Eli embraced the idea wholeheartedly.
Mm.
So, that makes a big difference too.
Yeah, doing things with others is always best, I think, most of the time. So I want to talk about the principles a little bit, but before we do that, describe like a day on the playa, like when even from the start when you pull into the gate and you have to buy tickets, so you have to, not just everybody can just show up. This is a Woodstock. So you have to buy a ticket, you get your ticket and months in advance, you drive all the way out there to the desert, and then what happens?
Great. Well, maybe the easiest is just to describe our first day on the playa,
Mm-hmm.
because I think anybody who is the burner will agree with me that no one ever forgets their first day on the playa. There are
Mm.
a lot of other standout days and adventures that people recount, but that first day, when you're like a tabula rasa and you're just open and you're assaulted by this experience, is really pretty indelible. The buildup, as you mentioned, also is a big part of it. The anticipation, getting tickets to Burning Man, this is almost always a mission. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they have they have a big online sale about 6 months before Burning Man, and everybody is poised with their mouses ready to click on purchase. And the minute it's 12 noon Pacific time, it opens, and they have to sell tens of thousands of tickets over what even to this day is a rickety infrastructure that crashes. You have to keep refreshing and things. And so when you finally get your ticket, it's this huge deal. And the first time I went in 2013, I had given up on this idea of my bucket list. I was now, 60 years old. Our daughter, my wife Betsy, and I, our daughter Eli, was now a young adult. She was getting her master's at Cal Arts and very independent, living in California. So she had come home for Christmas. What does she want for Christmas? A ticket to Burning Man. So we told her we'd pay for her ticket, and she got one. And a couple of months later, in the late spring, I'm on the phone with her, and I said, hey, baby, so who are you going to go to Burning Man with? And she said, I haven't found anybody that's going, or nobody yet. And I said, oh, well, I'll tell you what, if the summer comes and you don't have anybody to go with, let me know and I'll try to find a ticket. And she just said, fuck that, you're going. And she instantly got me on a waiting list, and we got a ticket. So getting to Burning Man was a mission. I flew from Miami to Los Angeles, rented this huge RV from Cruise America, and we piled it full of stuff along with a friend of hers who was a fire dancer, and all of her crap, which filled about half the camper. And I knew that they had in those days, you couldn't tell the RV company you were going to Burning Man. They wouldn't rent it to you.
Wow.
Because you totally trash the thing out unless you learn what you're doing. And I drove for 14 hours. I was literally hallucinating at the end, and it was very dangerous. I should not have done it, but I just had to get there. And when we left Los Angeles, there was an enormous forest fire burning through the whole Sierra Nevadas. And we drove up on the east side through the desert, but right up through the mountains, to the point where at one point I really thought we might asphyxiate it. The whole RV was full of smoke.
Wow.
It was 3 a.m, and we drive up to this desert. We drive down, we get to Reno, and then we drive at night, early morning, about 120 miles. And the sun, and we get to the entrance of this inland sea, this prehistoric inland sea. We drive in to the entrance. There are volunteers waving you in, and we come into the gates, and then you get in a line of vehicles. And there's every kind of vehicle, from a motorcycle to road queen RVs. And you slowly move up, and you get to the gates. There's about 4 or 5 of them wide. And at each one is a team of volunteers that are all looking fucking amazing, like in wild, wonderful outfits. And they board your vehicle, and they look around to make sure you're not bringing bizarre things like chickens or something to the Playa. And they also look for stowaways. Tickets now are, they've always been around $500. And so they're looking for stowaways. And then when you're done, you come through, and they direct you to another wide open area of this desert where there is a line of volunteer manned entrance points, each one with like a bell hanging. And you drive up, and they say, is this your first burn? And you say, yes. And they hand everyone who comes through a little guidebook. And then if it's your first burn, they say, get out. And you get out. You have to do a snow angel, but a dust angel.
Oh, jeez.
In the dust of the Playa.
Yeah.
The surface of the Playa is what I would imagine the surface of the moon looks like. It is talcum-like,
Oof.
kind of a whitish gray. And I had told everybody, we're going to keep this RV clean because I don't want to pay $1,000 for a cleaning fee. And we got back onto the RV, and instantly everything in it was coated in dust, just from that one experience. We drove in, we found our camp. The city is like a half moon. It's streets and avenues, beautifully laid out by the volunteers of Burning Man. And we found our camp, which at that year was directly on the Esplanade, which is the final row right on the Playa.
Nice.
So we had oceanfront property. And our camp was Couch Burners, which is related to the couch surfing group where you can travel around the world and sleep on people's couches. And a young Peruvian guy who was the camp leader met us. And because we were an RV, we were asked to park in a designated perimeter on the camp to serve as a wind block. At this point, Eli and I get out of the camper with our friend Denise, and we had junker beach cruiser bicycles we'd gotten off Craigslist. And we get off, and the camp leader shows us the camp, and we walk to the edge of the camp to this Esplanade, and we look out, and we were absolutely speechless. We could not believe it. You have no way to gauge from videos or anything the sheer immensity of the Playa. Your breath is taken away.
I'm excited to announce the release of my new book, Live Out Your List, Finding Joy Through a Bucket List Lifestyle. The book covers the 3 stages of the lifestyle, including bucket list mindset, bucket list creation, and bucket list management. It provides tips and strategies to enhance wherever you are in your bucket list journey. To learn more about the book and to receive 10% off when you purchase the ebook, visit crossingitoffpodcast.com/book. Purchase the book today and start to live out your list. Now back to the show.
And out in the middle of it, and that year in particular, it was extraordinary. Right out in front of us, about maybe a half a mile out, was the Burning Man. And that year, it was designed by an architect named Louis Zaumeyer, who amazingly comes from Reno, Nevada. And it was really what's now iconic pavilion of the Burning Man that looks like a huge flying saucer. It was related to the theme that year of the cargo cult, where we keep waiting for an alien creature to return again with these magical things that made our lives possible and interesting. So we just looked at each other and said, oh my God, let's go. And we just grabbed our bikes. And I'll never forget the feeling of flying out early in the morning across with this cloudless sky. There were no dust storms yet. It was too early in the morning. And we just flew across, and the feeling of leaving all of the baggage behind you and this complete freedom of flying across this playa on your bicycle. The whole playa flat as a pancake. We've zoomed up to the man. We went aboard the spaceship and came down slides. Then we saw another incredible structure that looked like a sort of a pyramid. And we get over there and discover this beautiful structure, all made out of 3D printed wood. It was probably 75 feet high, and It had a little white picket fence around it. I got off, and my daughter and Denise walked towards the entrance, and I grabbed this competition frisbee and threw it towards them, and it bounced off the little picket fence. And with that, this girl who looked as though she was about 6'2", in this tiny white bikini and white space boots, comes walking up, and she had like a volunteer thing around her neck, and she said, "I'm sorry, please don't throw that here." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to any harm." And she said, "This is the temple."
Mm.
Oh, so we went and experienced the temple. The temple is something in which you can go in and think, reflect, pray, do yoga, breathe, whatever centers you. And everyone leaves mementos in
Mm.
the temple. You can write on the beams of it. You can leave little recuerdos, little offerings, photographs, and the large majority are little mementos remembering loved ones.
Mhm.
A lot of them are pets that have departed. That was our day. We spent it flying across this vast expanse. We came back to our camp and all helped prepare dinner. We volunteered as bartenders. The camp always has this great open bar and a dance floor. So we did that till maybe 10 o'clock at night. And right at sundown, suddenly you always hear EDM music everywhere you go. But suddenly you hear this really loud EDM music. And it is like the march of the mutant vehicles. Down next to between the camps, roll these enormous, extremely creative art cars. Almost all of them are equipped to belch huge clouds of propane fire. And they all are equipped with speakers of some large and some enormous, with DJs and open bars. And they come cruising down. And after our bartender shift, we zoomed out on the playa on our bikes. And we were almost immediately disoriented. And this kind of began in the morning. When we went to the temple, we had a plan. We had made a plan. Okay, at this time, we'll all go to the center camp and have tea. At this time, we're all gonna, because you look through the guidebook, you go,
Right.
we're gonna go to the Thunderdome and see people swinging across it, fighting. Then at this time, we're gonna go over to this massage camp and whatever.
Right.
Well, when we left that temple about 8 in the morning, all of our plans disappeared, and I think we kind of saw each other once in a while over the next 10 hours, but it was very hit or miss. And that night, out on the playa, everything is LED lighting and flames. And you have never seen anything quite so jewel-like magical in your life. It's just magical and absorbing. And you just rush out into it and you're surrounded by it. And you immediately are taken by just sheer serendipity. You just explore and you'll meet people and they'll go, "Oh no, you got to come with us to the pickle joint." What's the pickle joint? Oh, and you go over there and you've lost your other friends and you're now with new people. And this went on until it got to be pretty late early in the morning. I would say like 2 in the morning. And I thought, I better go back to camp and check on my daughter, who I had arrived with this great feeling of protection for her and love for her, and very quickly realized she's on her own. She's doing it. And I looked back and realized I didn't have any idea where my camp was. I didn't know any direction at all. And I spent the next hour at least getting completely lost, and people going, oh, I think that's over there. And after that first night, it was a lot easier. In any case, the rest of the night was filled with going down little streets, going back out onto the playa, and then finally going to bed probably around 5 in the morning. And that was just our first night. And then things got a little more amazing after that with enhancements.
I can imagine. So Talk to us a little bit about these principles or tenets that everyone's asked to adhere to when they're in Burning Man, especially the consumerism. The ones that deal with consumerism are definitely interesting that people should understand if they're thinking about putting this. So there's the economy used on the Playa is what they call a gifting economy. How, describe what that looks like on a daily basis. Like, from my understanding, the only things you can buy when you're out there are coffee and ice, right? There's and
You've
water.
done your homework.
Yeah.
You've done your homework.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very interesting concept, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. It's closely tied um, to the idea of radical self-reliance. First of all, everyone is intended to arrive self-sufficient, primarily with water,
Hmm.
because there is zero humidity. Days are in the 90s. There is brilliant sun, and then nights go down so cold that one night it snowed,
Wow.
and so it's regularly in the low 50s, low 40s sometimes. So you have to be prepared. But the other thing is taking care of each other.
Mhm.
There's this cliche: the playa will provide, and the playa is sort of like the mother. And no matter what happens, you trust in fate. And playa, it's by coincidence, it always seems to come through. And gifting is like that. The idea of gifting is to have something with you that you find inspiring and kind of special that you'd like to share with others. Because of this decommodification, you're not allowed to barter for things. For instance, you can't
Mhm.
go to somebody and say, "I'll give you a quart of scotch if you give me a 5 gallon thing of water." No, you simply have to say, I think you need some scotch." And you just simply magnanimously give these to people that move you or people that don't. You could give it to somebody that pisses the shit out of you.
Mhm.
Um, but the cool thing about gifting, we always bring, each one of us brings something that we think is kind of special. But the cool thing about gifting is that, I don't know why, but you always seem to be given a gift when you're least expecting it.
Hmm.
You're lost, middle of a dust storm. You are so tired and you're angry, you're frustrated, and all of a sudden someone goes, "Hey," and they hand you a beautiful stone, and it uh, changes the way you're
Mm.
thinking. For instance, when I had that experience, my first burn, where I got completely disoriented, I learned to pick some kind of a landmark. It could be a 90-foot high inflated gorilla wearing a tutu, or an elephant with its trunk in the air. I picked some kind of a landmark that I would use as my orientation point. So one year I found beautiful little solid brass compasses with a fluid filled
Hmm.
compass rose that were just beautiful. And I put them on little lanyards. And if I had had enough time, I would have put BM 2015 on them or something,
Mhm.
just as a memento. But I would give those out occasionally, and people would love them. And what's really beautiful is when you go back for another burn, you'll run into people and they're wearing it.
Mm.
So people tend to accumulate these gifts and use them again. But that's it. It's really simply expressing your love for your fellow humans in a way that has no strings and no expectations except maybe a hug.
Yeah. It's a radical concept for sure, and especially here in the States.
And along those lines, you had opened this up asking about misconceptions about Burning Man, and I think people frequently think that at Burning Man, you can buy things from people. There are vendors and things like that. There's none of that, and it's remarkable how much time it takes to get used to that idea that you're not constantly being given things or offered things with a hidden agenda.
Mhm. What's the one thing that you were surprised at the end of your 8, 9 days that you walked away from, especially in your first burn, your first experience? What was that thing that changed you or was heightened in you from having crossed this item off your list?
I would say two things. The first one is the way I look at other people.
Mm.
Um, my second day or third day, I guess it was a Tuesday. I was still getting used to Burning Man. Now I get accustomed to it uh, much quicker. But on Tuesday morning, it was daybreak. I'm having a cigarette and a cup of coffee outside, and I see these two men my age, but with paunches, and they go walking by with these pink tutus on and their dicks hanging down. And they went walking by, and I saw a couple other people with tutus, and I turned to my daughter and I said, "What a bunch of bullshit!" And look, you see those guys with those tutus on? And she turned to me and she said, "It's Tutu Tuesday, Dad, and it's Burning Man. Get over it." And it was like this. It was like this slap, and I went, "Holy shit! I do I really think of people that do I have these knee-jerk reactions to others? That's not the way I should be and or want to be, and that's not me." And it immediately changed me, and I've never gone back. The
Wow.
the other thing was, and it's again tied to this decommodification, was when we were out on the playa. I knew, of course, that the man would burn at the end of our
Mhm.
experience. But I thought they'd burn the man on the last night. They don't. They burn the man on the penultimate night, on Saturday night. But what I didn't understand was all of the other magnificent wooden structures, handcrafted,
Mhm.
like the temple. They didn't pack this up and take it away. They burned the goddamn thing. And I thought, wow. And it's so tied to this idea of learning to be able to create beauty, love things, and then completely embrace their ephemeral nature, that they
Mm.
go away. And the cycle continues. And especially with Burning Man, the next year or after we started going every 2 years, you come back and there'd be a whole new beautiful thing to fall in love with, knowing full well that you'd have to give it up. You know.
That's amazing. I'm going to ask you one more question, but yeah, we could probably sit here all day and talk about this, and I love that. What's something else that's like completely different than Burning Man that you would like to cross off your bucket list?
Well, before I say that, I just have to say two other things about Burning
Sure.
Man. I mentioned the tickets are always difficult. They canceled Burning Man in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic. We were brokenhearted. We gave one ticket back to the Burning Man Foundation as a gift from 2020, and we sold the other ticket back to Burning Man. This year, we were all excited, and we have everything planned. Our daughter, her new husband, John Hunter, we had, and friends from Miami who we brought into Burning Man, like Yuri, all excited, and we couldn't get tickets.
Mm.
And we couldn't get tickets. And everybody tried to feel optimistic. And yesterday was the oh my God sale, the last chance to get a ticket
Yeah.
when they just let 5,000 tickets out, and we didn't get tickets.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, Eli's husband, John, texted, "I got tickets." He got a couple tickets. So by coincidence, because this talk with you has been planned for quite a while, we managed to get tickets. So Betsy and I are again. I'm going for my fifth burn.
Wow.
Betsy for her fourth, and I guess Eli and John for their sixth or seventh.
Wow.
So we're super excited, and we're starting to get self-reliant really
There
quickly.
you go.
Um,
There you
as far as something else on my bucket list, I have worked in about 25 of the poorest countries around the world for over 20 years in my past life. I have never been to Italy. And my wife, Betsy, who is a world traveler, has never been to Italy.
I think that's a
So
no-brainer.
that's
Yeah.
on my bucket list. And
Yeah.
in October, another on my bucket list, Betsy and I are going with our son Henry, and we're surfing southern Portugal. So
Nice.
we're ready.
Awesome. David, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience and maybe hopefully demystifying some of Burning Man for other people and that have it on their list. I appreciate it greatly. And I'm excited you get to go again this year.
Thank you, Roger. And anybody that sees this, if you really want to get a feeling for the first year at Burning Man, watch the fabulous YouTube video that's a joke about the young guy who comes back from his first burn, comes home to his girlfriend and tries to describe it to her. It's absolutely hilarious, and it's absolutely true.
Awesome. I will put that in the show notes along with other links for Burning Man so that people that are doing that can or have an idea. That's a great suggestion. I appreciate that. David, thank you so much for being here and enjoy your future burns.
Thank you, Roger. See you on the Playa, okay?
As a reminder to our listeners, in this episode's show notes, you will find links to learn more about this week's guests and information on how you can cross this item off of your list. You can follow my adventures of crossing items off of my bucket list on Instagram and Facebook, and as always, new episodes of this podcast are available to stream every Friday morning. We will meet you here next week, and until then, keep living out your list.